Hello, you're watching Health Day Now. I'm Mabel Jong. Still wondering whether the vaccines are truly safe, whether they really work, or if one is better than the other? Dr. Paul Offit of the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia joins me now to answer these questions, debunk myths, and more. Really great to see you again, Dr. Offit.
Good seeing you, Mabel.
Well, let's get right to it. The mRNA vaccines couldn't possibly be safe because they were rushed through and we don't have enough long-term data.
I think if you asked scientists a year ago whether or not it would be possible to use this novel technology to create vaccines that were 95% effective against all manner of illness, against all age groups, against all comorbidities, I think no one would have thought that was possible. And not only was it shown to be safe in tens of thousands of people before approval, it's been shown to be safe in tens of millions of people post-approval. It doesn't even have a rare side effect. It is remarkable how effective and safe these vaccines are. But I can see where people would be worried because it was the fastest vaccine ever developed. It was developed using a novel technology that we hadn't used before. But the proof is in the pudding, and the pudding is at hand. It was reasonable to be skeptical, I think, initially, but that skepticism should melt away in the face of all these compelling data.
Okay, that novel technology that you refer to, there are rumors circulating around that it creates a strand that enters the cell and changes the protein within that cell to create the immune response. Is that true? And if so, what is that going to mean much longer term, especially for young people?
All right, so messenger RNA is something we all have in our bodies. We have it in all of our cells. Messenger RNA is a small piece of genetic material that is essentially translated to a protein. And in our cell, we have 200,000 copies of messenger RNA all the time. It's making proteins and enzymes to keep us alive. What this does, it enters the cytoplasm of your cell, in other words, outside the nucleus where the DNA is. And then over a few days, it's translated to this SARS coronavirus, this spike protein. So you are given the gene that codes for the spike protein. So your body makes the coronavirus spike protein, and then your body makes an antibody response. Over a few days that mRNA lasts before it's broken down, it can't possibly alter your DNA. It is safe as it's been shown. It's a safe and effective way to induce an immune response that's protective. And I think will probably be now applied to a variety of other things like human immunodeficiency virus or malaria or universal flu vaccine. I think this has opened an important door.
Okay, well, let's get to the vaccine hurts a woman's fertility and is not recommended for couples hoping to conceive.
Yeah, absolutely false. The vaccine, first of all, again, it uses a process that is used by our bodies all the time. I mean, messenger RNA is not a novel thing to our bodies. We all have messenger RNA. And so the CDC has said that a pregnant woman could reasonably can reasonably get this vaccine. And obviously there's no evidence that as the natural virus has swept across this country, that it's in any way affected fertility. It was sort of all built on this false notion that coronavirus surface protein mimics a protein on the surface of placental cells, so-called syncytia 1, which was wrong. So again, falsehood flies and the truth comes limping after, according to Jonathan Swift, and that's what's happened here. One thing here are the facts, though. If you're a woman who's pregnant, you are much more likely to suffer severe disease if you're infected with this virus than if you're a woman of the same age who's not pregnant. So women clearly benefit. More than 30,000 pregnant women have already received this vaccine safely, and more than half of them are being followed really on a weekly basis by the CDC, not only through their pregnancy, but for the first 6 months after their child is born to make sure there's not a problem. So we're looking, but there's no reason to suspect there would be a problem.
Okay, so you're not concerned, or this is not true, that the vaccine is hurtful to breastfeeding moms?
No, and again, the worst case scenario is that the breastfeeding mother will, if she have gotten vaccinated, will develop antibodies that she will passively transfer to her baby that will bathe the upper mucosal surfaces with antibodies that would make it less likely for that baby to get infected. It's for the same reason we give the influenza vaccine to protect both the mother and the baby. We give the whooping cough vaccine to protect the mother and especially the baby. This is falling into that category, the third pregnancy vaccine, if you will.
Okay, so along that theme, the vaccines come from fetal tissue. So if you're pro-life, you don't want this.
Right, that's true of neither of the mRNA vaccines. The Johnson and Johnson and the UK AstraZeneca vaccine, those are vector viruses. So viruses can only grow in cells. The cells that are used are cells that were generated from terminated pregnancies that were performed, one in 1972, the other in 1985. These vaccines are not alone in that. I mean, there are a number of vaccines that are made using also cells, so-called WI38 or MRC5 cells, like the chickenpox vaccine, the hepatitis A vaccine, the German measles vaccine, one of the rabies vaccines are made similarly. The Catholic Church has weighed in on this. They have said that although they would have preferred that the researchers didn't use those cells, that the Catholic Church, like all religions, cares deeply about the health and well-being of children and families. These vaccines save lives and keep children healthier and adults healthier and safer. So therefore, they don't stand in the way of them.
The vaccines are ineffective against the variants from South Africa and elsewhere. So they're able to get around the vaccine protection.
Yeah, also not true. Just to define terms, the virus that swept through China was not the virus that left China. The virus that left China and swept through Europe and swept through the United States was the first variant. It was called the D614G variant. That's the virus to which all vaccines are made. All vaccines are made to protect that first variant that left China. So the question is, do those vaccines also protect against other variants, like the UK variant, the South African variant, the Brazilian variant? And the answer is, at least for the UK variant, yes, just as well as it would for the D614G variant, the common virus. Not as well for the South African and Brazilian variant, but well enough to keep you out of the hospital, keep you out of the ICU, and keep you from dying. So those vaccines do prevent severe infection, which is really what you care about. I think if we get to the point where variants emerge, which despite the fact that you've been naturally infected, or despite the fact that you've been immunized fully, that you still are getting hospitalized, I think that's when a line gets crossed, and that's when we will talk about second generation vaccines.
Okay. I've already had COVID. I don't need the vaccine.
Yeah, no, that's actually a reasonable question. I think if you have survived this infection, in all likelihood, you are protected against moderate to severe disease associated with reinfection. I think that's a reasonable comment. I think the CDC, when they made the decision not to distinguish people who've been naturally infected or immunized, is they didn't want to add another bureaucratic level of making sure everybody had to get tested before they got the vaccine, which was just slowed things and made it more difficult and confusing. There's no downside to getting vaccinated if you've been naturally infected. It just boosts your immunity. But you could reasonably make that argument.
Okay. And do you have a recommendation of time you should wait if you want to get the vaccine? If you've had the virus, how long should you wait?
You should wait until you have no symptoms.
Okay. All right. So someone says, I'm young, so I'm unlikely to get extreme symptoms. So why shouldn't it be safer to just get COVID and recover?
Well, I'd like to know where you get the guarantee that you recover. While it is true that about 92% of the deaths occur in those over 55, and I think 40% of the deaths in nursing homes. The fact of the matter is, last year, about 174 children died of COVID, meaning children less than 18 years of age. So anybody's at risk. Certainly, people, healthy young people, can not only suffer this virus but also be hospitalized from it. And also, it is a heinous virus, and it causes you to make an immune response to the cells that line your blood vessels, causing vasculitis, inflammation of the blood vessels. So you can have strokes, heart attacks, liver disease, kidney disease. I mean, there are a lot of healthy young athletes, for example, that now have certain heart abnormalities because they were infected with this virus. Don't be so cavalier about this virus. It's not just a killer; it's also a crippler.
Okay, so along those lines, younger people are experiencing more intense side effects from the vaccine than older folks.
Yeah, never thought there would be an advantage to being older, but it is true that if you're younger than 65, you're more likely to have a reaction, an immunological reaction, which is associated with symptoms, than if you're younger than if you're older than 65. But that's just a evidence of your immune system. I mean, when your immune response is activated, you make a various series of proteins called cytokines, which have side effects like fever, fatigue, headache, joint pain, muscle ache. I mean, that happened for me. I mean, I got the second dose of an mRNA vaccine, and for 2 days I had fever, chills, and fatigue, which I treated successfully by constantly whining. And I'm giving that to your viewers.
Okay, the Moderna vaccine has caused deaths, so very scary to get the second one.
Well, again, these vaccines are given to the population. They don't make you immortal. They're going to be people who have and is temporally associated, I mean, associated in time. You get the vaccine, then have a problem, especially when you vaccinate an older population. So the CDC investigates any deaths that have been reported associated with the vaccine to make sure that it wasn't causally associated with the vaccine. And in every case, it hasn't been. It's been coincidentally associated. So that people can be reassured. Nor would you have ever expected it to be a problem. I mean, it's just messenger RNA that gets translated to a protein for a few days, and that's it. There's no reason to suspect it would cause harm. And to date, it has the only real side effect is so-called anaphylaxis, which is a severe immediate allergic reaction, which is seen typically within 15 minutes of getting a dose. It's treated successfully with epinephrine. No one has died from that, but that is a serious side effect of any vaccine. I mean, you should wait around for 15 minutes after getting any vaccine. Typically, it occurs in a million people. For these vaccines, it may be a little higher than that. It looks like it's 5 per million for the Pfizer vaccine, about 2.8 per million for the Moderna vaccine, but treatable and easily recognizable and quickly recognizable.
Well, does it matter which vaccine your body has taken in the past for which one you should get in the future?
Well, obviously, if you've gotten the first dose of the mRNA vaccines, you have to get the second dose of the mRNA vaccines.
Right.
Johnson & Johnson currently is recommended as a 1-dose vaccine. That company is actually doing a 2-dose trial in the United States, which we'll probably learn about in the second half of this year. It may be that the second dose has even better protection than the first dose, but the first dose induces protection, and it also induces so-called cellular immunity, which is evidence for longer-term immunity, which occurs also after the second dose of the mRNA vaccine. So you should stick with the vaccines that you got.
Okay, well, speaking of the different options, AstraZeneca may be considered for emergency approval in the US as early as next month, but we've seen that up to 11 countries in Europe have already suspended its use. So what's the status of that?
Well, that's right. So the company, the AstraZeneca, is currently doing a 2-dose trial of their vaccine in the United States. Those data haven't been submitted yet to the FDA for approval, so we'll see. Yeah, I'm a little disappointed actually with what's going on in Europe. I mean, it's not hard to answer this question. First of all, blood clots are not uncommon. I mean, we have about 900,000 people every year in the United States who suffer blood clots. That's why you see advertisements on TV for medicines to prevent or treat deep vein thrombosis. It's that common. But so it's not shocking to believe that, someone would get a vaccine and then would suffer a common disease after getting the vaccine. The question is are you more likely to have that if you've gotten a vaccine than if you haven't? That's an easily answerable question. According to UK regulators, the data are that you are not more likely to develop a blood clot if you got the vaccine or if you didn't. I really wish that the other European countries had very carefully examined all the data to see whether or not this was occurring at greater than background rates, because all the evidence to date is that it's not occurring at greater than background rates. So what they did was they basically elevated a theoretical and arguably disproven risk above the real risk of getting this disease and damned that vaccine. I think that it is going to create sort of a cloud over this vaccine. While it's very easy to scare people, it's very hard to unscare them, and I think that may be what's going to happen here.
Okay, since you're playing along, finally, a favorite with conspiracy theorists, Bill Gates, along with the secret coalition, is seeking to microchip the world population using a COVID vaccine. Your response?
I want to know how the microchip fits through the end of that needle. If somebody could just explain that to me, then I'll have a better sense of this.
Okay. Dr. Paul Offit, thank you so much. We've been speaking with Dr. Paul Offit of the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Thanks so much again for playing along.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So you're fully vaccinated, time to rip off the mask and return to normal life, right? Well, not so fast. The recently released CDC guidelines are somewhat clear about what you can and cannot do post-vaccination. Joining me now is Dr. Mercedes Carnethon, Vice Chair of Preventive Medicine at the Northwestern Feinberg School of Medicine. Dr. Carnethon, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me, and good morning.
Good morning. Now, if you and your friends are fully vaccinated, can you hang out together indoors without masking?
Right now, the current CDC interim guidelines state that it is safe for vaccinated individuals to get together indoors without masks. There are, of course, limitations to that. You don't want a house full of 1,000 people or, a standard group of 20, but small groups can congregate at this time. And one thing I'd like to point out is that the CDC calls these interim guidelines. And the reason they're interim is that our knowledge is still evolving. So it is currently considered safe for that sort of indoor gathering to occur.
Okay. And it sounds like also that masking and socially distancing is still being recommended. What's the concern if people are fully vaccinated?
The primary concern right now is that while evidence is emerging to suggest that vaccinated individuals cannot transmit the virus, it's not confirmed yet. And the studies have not yet shown to the level of evidence that we'd like to see that vaccinated individuals can't still contract, carry, and thus transmit, which is why caution is being offered and the reason why these guidelines are still considered interim guidelines.
Okay. Now, if you're fully vaccinated, can you be outdoors without a mask?
Right now, yes, the feeling is that with the outdoor air and the increased circulation, if you are around other vaccinated individuals in small groups, that it may be safe to socialize outside without a mask. However, individuals with underlying conditions or who have family members in their household whose health may be a little more fragile should still exercise the utmost caution by maintaining mask wearing.
Can you go to the mall without a mask?
Right now, the guidelines for many businesses still require mask wearing. And of course, this varies by state. I would certainly say my reading and interpretation of the guidelines state that masks should be worn in large areas where there are a number of people gathering. And there are too many factors for you to be able to control. So my read of the guidelines right now is that it is certainly still recommended that you wear a mask in a mall or a grocery store or any other large venue.
Okay. What about traveling out of state? Is that okay?
Traveling out of state, you have to be sure that you're following the guidelines that are designated by the state where you're going and the state that you're going to be coming back from. Many require testing requirements before re-entering the state, or once you return to your home state, testing requirements for you to get back to regular activities, such as going to work or sending children to school. So right now, though, the CDC guidelines still suggest that non-essential travel not take place.
Okay. Do we know yet how long the vaccines will be effective in protecting people?
This is the case where we say we're building the ship while we're at sea. Right now, they do not know how long the vaccines are effective. There are studies ongoing to see how long one's antibody levels remain high following vaccination. But one of the challenges that we're facing are with these new variants and whether or not we have to tweak the formulas a little bit that are in our vaccines. And so until we know that and know how long immunity will be conferred from a vaccination, the doctors are really taking a wait and see approach to know whether this is going to be an annual shot like the flu shot or whether it will confer some immunity longer than annual.
Okay. And so it sounds like it's still going to be quite a while before we all feel safe without a mask.
We're just not in the clear. I think we all see hope on the horizon, opportunities to get back together with friends, with statements of hope that 4th of July may look close to normal. But we're definitely not out of the woodwork. And part of that is we have vaccine coverage for adults right now, but we don't have vaccine coverage yet for children. And children do contract COVID-19. And so until we can safely protect all members of our society, we still need to maintain the basic measures of mask wearing, hand washing, and social distancing.
We're heading in the direction that people have been hoping for, really desperate for. But why may people feel apprehensive after an entire year of these precautions?
Well, it's amazing how quickly we became used to wearing masks and staying away from people. I don't know if you have the same feeling I do when you see people in television shows where they're close together or scenes that were filmed prior to the introduction of COVID-19, it makes us feel nervous because that isn't the way we're used to interacting with one another anymore. And so I think it's going to take a while until people feel comfortable again being in group settings without protective equipment. And that's appropriate because we know so little right now. There have been infectious diseases in the past where we've seen wave after wave because these viruses do mutate. And so we're not in the clear. And I think as we, though, have the opportunity to socialize, we should become more comfortable and find ways to be happy with our current guidelines and restrictions.
Would you describe this as trauma, and may the emotional impact be permanent for some people?
Certainly. There's been a lot discussed about isolation, loneliness, what this has led to with people not being able to be together over the course of the year. A lot has been made about the impact on youth, having been abruptly pulled out of schools and out of their social circles. Most certainly, people have experienced loss. I think about the loss of sports seasons that high schoolers and middle schoolers feel, the loss of friends who they didn't have a chance to spend time with. And there are going to be people coping with this. It's critically important that people get the help that they need if they're feeling stress. And if these feelings of anxiety and depression aren't resolving, it's important to reach out. One of the unfortunate downsides that we have seen are an increase in opioid-related deaths in certain areas of the country, an increase in traumatic deaths, and this comes from stemming from some of the psychological distress that we've all experienced.
Right. Dr. Mercedes Carnethon, we thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thank you.
We've been speaking with Dr. Mercedes Carnethon of Northwestern Feinberg School of Medicine. And thank you all for watching Health Day Now. I'm Mabel Jong.